For joining us for another devotion. Notice we dropped the name Daily Devotion because we are going to move to a new format of 3 devotions a week, and hopefully that will become consistent in what we do. And the reason for that is simply because as things have begun to open up, more of my time is being pulled in different directions, trying to meet the needs of the members of our church and community people. And so anyway, just want to let you know that. And so they won't be every day, but they will still be coming fairly consistent at you. And along with our Sunday service and along with our Wednesday service, you'll and obviously COVID updates, you'll be hearing from me still regularly. Some of you may already think that's too much. So anyway, but I do want to take you today to John chapter 4. You probably know the account where Jesus goes and he meets the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. And at that time, it was so frowned upon or banned for Jews and Samaritans to talk to one another. Not only that, but the social custom of a man talking to a woman in that day was very, very different than it is now. We take a lot of things for granted, and if we're not careful, we can come to this story with a very Western worldview instead of an Eastern worldview in which Jesus lived. And so here's very, very interesting. He has this conversation with this woman. He is asking her for a drink of water. She tells him that, she's here. They start opening up to one another. He tells her more about her than she shares with Jesus. And so she knows that he is the Messiah. She can tell there is something about this man that is different. And then it says this, and I want you to hear this because it's so incredible. It says this, verse 27 of John chapter 4, it says, "Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, 'What do you want?' or 'Why are you talking with her?'" I find this so interesting and a little bit convicting of who we are as people. So the disciples of Jesus return, and they are surprised by the social setting that is happening before their eyes. They are surprised that Jesus is taking the time to speak with a woman, but especially a Samaritan woman. And so they sit in their awkwardness. They look around, they see the situation, but notice that it also says no one said anything. I think that this happens more than what we know, where people who follow Jesus, who love Jesus, who are a part of what Jesus is doing, they question the methods of Jesus. And if Jesus were to walk in today's shoes and today's culture, they would be surprised at where they would find Jesus. And they would be surprised at who Jesus would be interacting with and who he'd be talking with. And they'd be surprised. But I've also noticed that this story has a little bit of Southern hospitality in it, that maybe they wouldn't say anything, that they would ponder among themselves. Maybe they had a conversation among themselves as the disciples looked, and maybe they had that conversation away from Jesus. And it's very, very interesting that they see this and they don't say anything. It says, "But no one asked, 'What do you want?' or 'Why are you talking with her?'" Very interesting sometimes the silence of God's people. Notice this though, verse 28, "Then leaving her water jar," so the very thing she was there at the well for, "then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, 'Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?' They came out of the town and made their way to him." Now, it's very interesting that the disciples had just been in the town and they were going to get something to eat. And so it's very, very interesting that they said this, that they were going to the town and they were going there to get something to eat. And notice this, that they bring nobody back with them to see Jesus. But this woman who was in that day considered unclean, was in that day considered not to be worthy of a conversation with Jesus, that's why they come back surprised because of all the social ramifications that this account has. They're watching this play out. They don't say anything. They don't bring anybody back from the town to see Jesus. They don't marvel at who he is and who they're spending time with. But yet this woman who just had this one conversation, suddenly she realizes who he is. She says, "Could this be the Messiah?" She goes back into the town, recruits everybody to come out, and they all come to see Jesus. Now, I want to think about that for just a second. In your life, you may call yourself a disciple of Jesus, but are you? And are you silent when God is calling you to speak? Now, I'm not just talking about the social issues of the day. I'm talking about Jesus. Like, we need to be a people that are engaged in what God is calling us to do. We need to be engaged in establishing righteousness and justice, and we need to be engaged in all of that as long as it's coming back to the point of Jesus, as long as the picture is that we are presenting the gospel all along the way, and we are communicating the gospel all along the way. And so the picture is here that the disciples, they're silent, and yet the one to whom Jesus was speaking to, the one to whom was unclean in so many ways or viewpoints according to the law, she is the evangelist in the story. She's the one that goes and tells the whole town about Jesus and invites them to come and see them. Oh, today I hope you would take the time to marvel at what God has done in your life, to marvel at the grace that He's been given, and to be reminded that to whom much is given, much is required. And one of the things that God requires us to do and to be a part of is to share about Him and to make His name known. So today and tomorrow as you go out, I pray that you would find opportunities to share about Jesus, about our Savior, about the Lord, about the King of Kings. And I pray that you would have the opportunity to tell someone about what Jesus has done for you. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.